Welcome to the Air Power Airwaves, the Air Power Manufacturing Solutions podcast series where we talk about manufacturing issues that impact you. Welcome to another episode of Air Power Airwaves. I have the one and only Eddie Edward the Finisher Rhodes beside me. Those of you that know this guy know that he is a wealth of practical and applicable finishing technology and skills in the field. Eddie, welcome to Air Power Airwaves.
Nice to be here.
Hey
everybody.
You are truly my brother. We met in the field, man, how long ago? It was like 2003. We met at a customer's account after I heard about you for like 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, the powder shop.
Yeah, I was like, you gotta meet this guy, Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I met you, and pretty soon we were fast friends.
Yep, and running hard together and
yep.
Utilizing each other's skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been in the finishing industry for a while, but I didn't know, I started selling powder coating.
Right.
For one of the top 5 in the globe. And I remember that I did not know anything about the powder coating application equipment, the guns, whether it be a simple manual or something really complicated. And so when I found you, you were like, you know what? I know a lot about that gun, but what I don't know is what makes powder do what it does.
Right.
What is powder? Like, so we began to educate each other, and what was cool about that is we had basically the same half of my territory was all of your territory.
Yeah.
And
I would liken that to cross-pollination.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really was.
Absolutely.
You took the knowledge of the coating, the knowledge of the equipment, and we took that to the customer base, and the customer base found merit and value in that, and a very formidable team. Still are, but
the hardest thing for us, I think, was finding that third party, which was the pretreatment.
Yeah.
And I know we'd have a really good one, and then they would move or retire or whatever, or leave the company, and we had to find another. We went through numerous, so we never could really get. I think maybe 1 or 2 over the years we got traction with for a while, but it was much harder. Plus, I mean,
you're jumping regions too,
right? But I think if you're selling pretreatment chemistry, they earn their money just like we do.
Absolutely.
If I only sold a 5-pound box of powder to a powder job shop, and that's all they bought once a month, I can't take my family to McDonald's for one breakfast or one lunch or one dinner for the month with the commissions that I'm going to earn, right?
Starbucks coffee, out of question.
So, God, I'm looking for the 99-cent on discount day. But I think
part of hotel,
motel, Holiday Inn.
I stay here. Yeah,
I'm sleeping in the car if I'm making that. No, but I think the thing is that somebody who's selling pretreatment chemistry to spend a lot of time with a small job shop that's only buying, a pail of chemistry a month. The money's not there, so they have to spend their time. That's part of the problem that you run into trying to find that third party that can really spend that time, especially while you're learning.
That's something that we can fall back on one of our early videos when we were talking about picking a partner, right?
Yes, yep.
And that if you out there are a small shop and a pretreatment person comes in and talks to you, and they're willing to come in and help you titrate and take care of you, that person's worth their weight in gold. You better keep them.
Keep them on your team.
Yes, because you're not going to get that from everybody.
And if you have that trifecta of a powder or a liquid vendor the equipment vendor and the pre-treatment vendor, I've said it many times, if those three people are talking and those three people are communicating with each other about the process that you're running, you've already won. You've already
Yes.
won,
Yes.
and you're on your way to a successful operation. So
That's the stars alignment, really. I mean, if you look at it that
Yeah.
way from an astrology side, that all the stars align, and if you have that as a small job shop or a large production shop, then you have what a lot of people don't have. So take care of those people. Be just hound dog loyal to them,
Yep.
and you're going to win, and you're not going to have somebody pointing fingers. It's the powder, it's the chemical, it's the equipment, we're going to fix your problem.
that's correct. Correct. All right. Well, I brought you on board for this This is your first podcast.
It is. I'm happy
So
to be here.
we've
Excited.
got another one we're going to film soon, and I won't give a hint to that one, but this one is actually going to be a interesting, a little bit of a challenge. I've been exposed to a lot of liquid with Air Power. Liquid systems.
It's the bulk of our business.
And obviously powder coating's in my blood. I've had that for a long time.
Yeah.
But we get a question regularly from our customers or potential customers. How can I or should I transfer from liquid paint to powder coating? Make that shift. And there's different reasons, there's different things that drive that decision. It's not just like, I wonder if I should go to powder instead of this liquid process. There are a lot of things that drive that.
Sure.
And let's talk about some of those things that drive that. Why is somebody questioning whether they should move away from the liquid and go to powder?
I would say typically it's the end user, their customer, is demanding that they go to powder for whatever reason. It could
Durability.
Green.
Greener.
It makes that company look green. And it could be for their competitor, whoever the end user is making product widget B,
Right.
has competitor A that's using powder, and they say, I got to put it on mine too, or they're going to blow me out of the water, and I'm not going to have any of this business.
I mean, the first one that hits me is a durability factor.
Sure.
There are products that people will spray. They want like liquid spray on something down, dirty, cheap. They just want to take a part and make it look pretty, like a tool, like a hand tool, like something like an auger, like a hand auger or drill bit or something. They want all the drill bits to look blue when they sell them. And like the first week that somebody's out using that drill bit, the blue's gone.
Like a bulldozer blade.
But it didn't need the powder for a durability standpoint.
Right.
Now, you take somebody else who maybe have been set up to do fencing and railing manufacturing.
Yes.
And they were spraying liquid because liquid's what they always did, right?
Right.
That's the way they started the company 35 years ago. And now
With less investment.
And it was easier to do.
Yeah.
And with today's technology, they can put powder on that same exact fence with some process changes. Obviously, they have to go from powder guns and have to move into powder guns, a powder booth to contain the powder when they're spraying, and the cure oven. They have to have those because the same cure oven for the liquid that needed to be 150 to 250 degrees is not going to cure the powder. It's just not going to do it. Now, the reasoning for the change might have been market driven because all of a sudden all of these fences and railing manufacturers are going powder because it's more durable. There's no chipping, there's no flaking, it can get hit. It can get hit.
Yeah.
And the picket bends and there's no flaking of powder. It can take that brutal
Yeah.
It can take life.
Rough environment.
And so, in order for them to now not be declared as the crappiest fence in the market, they're being driven to go powder. So,
Sure.
and I guess there's a couple ways of looking at this: is adding powder to your process or transitioning everything over, like boot liquid out. And there's reasons for that. Reasoning for that would be permitting. You know, permitting issues are driving a lot of change.
VOCs. And for those of you who don't know that's on the powder side now maybe, VOCs is an acronym for volatile organic compounds, which are your solvents and co-solvents in your liquid paints. And
Danger zone.
well, it requires a permit for that from your state. And you permit annually for your anticipated usage and or discharge of these VOCs. So if you're up against your permit levels and the next permit you become a Title V and your tonnage goes up and your cost for the permit is like, wow, I don't think I can do this. So then you look at different technology with liquid, you look at different paints, and if you still can't get there with that, by going liquid electrostatic or reducing your VOCs with a low VOC paint, then you got to look at powder.
Yep.
And powder has no VOCs and doesn't require any permitting. So
It does require some safety, and we're going to talk about that later.
Sure.
Just because it doesn't have VOCs, just because it's safer in general, doesn't mean it doesn't have its own health risks.
Well,
we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, but that's PPE, not an environmental impact.
Correct.
So
correct.
Don't confuse the two.
So I just wanted to make that clear. If
Sure.
somebody's watching now that turns the camera off now, either turns their channel on YouTube or changes it on airwaves, which I hope you don't. And
Well, stick with us. This is going to get
going to get interesting.
Interesting.
All right, so the next one would be touching the part quicker, moving the part through the process faster. You know, with liquid, especially if it's an ambient dry situation where you need 12 to 24 hours in the plant, you know, with it just off to the side curing on its own good time, you can't touch it.
Even with plural component urethanes, right? That are designed for longer UV exposure. They're just better paints,
Yep.
right? Even though you send them through a short cure cycle to speed it up so that you can handle the parts, the tech data sheet, and folks, this is what we're mostly interested in when we talk to you, is the technical data sheet, not the MSDS sheet, okay? So we look at, I can handle the part without putting imprints on it and get it off of the rack or get it somewhere else and let it sit there. But if you look at the technical data sheet, it still says 24 hours for full cure, even after I've had it in a bit of an oven. So it's still outgassing, and I've seen my customers multiple times sleeve a part in plastic to protect it during transit, and when it gets to the customer, it smells to high heavens because it hadn't finished outgassing and all the solvents evaporating up off of the substrate.
Yep.
So, to your point, I pre-treat it, the powder, I pre-treat the substrate, I powder coat the substrate, I push it in the oven or send it through the oven, and when it comes out and cools down to touch, it's ready to go.
Yep.
There's no way.
And there are some crazy processes out there where I've seen, I'll leave the names out of it, but I've seen where large tanks, like think of a large tank that holds pressurized gases. I'll leave it there. I don't want to give anything crazy away. But you have very large tanks, size of a small car. The steel has got to be incredibly thick on the actual, tube of it. And I've seen it where they go through the powder booth, they go through the cure, and there has to be a guy touching that tank within like 5 to 10 minutes after it comes off the line. So it's kind of unheard of, but it goes through a waterfall where it comes out of the oven and so many feet to kind of keep the water away from the oven. It was some kind of an IR cure. Super hot, super fast, and it's just literally a sheet of water, of cold water coming down on, and it's just hissing and bubbling everywhere. The water's just bubbling and evaporating.
Way over 212.
And but they have to get it down, so they've worked with their powder vendor, who I'll name nameless. They've worked with them to modify the properties of the powder to hold up to that kind of a brutal cool down. Without, I don't think every powder could necessarily handle that.
That comes back to a word we used earlier, formulation.
And you touched on something just very quickly. MSDS sheet is a materials safety data sheet. That is what's in this material or what's in this paint, and basically how you should handle this paint from a safety and storage scenario. A tech data sheet is the one that Eddie was referring to, and the tech data sheet is how to utilize this liquid or this powder, how to utilize it, and what are the cure parameters, what are the mill thickness parameters, things like that. When you put it on, where should you fall in?
Great point.
Those two different things.
We should run that rabbit hole a minute.
So your fire department, your fire marshal requires you to have which one? An MSDS sheet, which tells you what's in that paint, or a tech data sheet that tells you how to use that paint. They need the MSDS sheets, and you are required by law, pretty much any business that does finishing in the United States and Europe, those are the only two I know for sure, in Canada, require you to have those on site. So if the fire marshal comes out, or God forbid you actually have a fire event in your plant, they can grab that MSDS book and have access to everything that you have on your plant floor.
So you should have a duplicate. One should be easily accessible for the personnel that comes in to take care of the problem, and one out on the shop floor, because if someone gets hurt out on the shop floor or something happens, then you can take that book immediately with you and transport that to the hospital with them or something of that nature. So easily accessible.
I know this is a foreign thought, but I have several friends that own powder coating shops and liquid painting shops, and you'd be surprised the reception you get if you invite the local fire department into your facility. Show them what you're doing, show them how you've done it, ask them if there's anything that you could do better. And what can you do to provide them with the best access for what they need if there was ever an event there. And you will probably make some friends versus the alternate. If you do something bad and just expect forgiveness, you might not get that forgiveness. No. You might get a fine.
Well, in this particular situation, playing dumb and asking for forgiveness later, it's the wrong move.
And it costs you money.
Be proactive and invite them, engage them, and learn from it. And you'll have a safer environment for it, and they'll thank you for it, and you'll get grace. That's the best way to put it.
Correct.
You'll get grace from these authorities
because they know you're working for the better good.
Yes.
Of your community, right?
And your intentions.
So, first, what we talked about already were just driving factors that would lead somebody to start thinking about this.
Sure.
So the first real step is defining what you're going to convert. Are we converting an old liquid spray booth that had 3 or 4 colors dedicated to different pressure pots or whatever? And there's a whole myriad of things that you could do, but we're going to convert that to powder. Are we converting that, or are we going little to little, little to big to big? What kind of system are we dealing with? So, one of the issues that you have with liquid, in many cases, liquid does not require a big footprint. The bigger footprint that you need is actually once you spray parts. You have them laid out on racks, and you can't do anything with them for 24 hours. So that's a big part of the footprint there. But if you're going to powder, there are liquid paints that require, or you can speed up the cure with an oven.
Yeah.
It's a lower temperature oven. There's also bake booths.
Spray and bake.
That you spray and bake. Spray in the booth, bake it. But they're lower temperature bakes. In powder, that is not going to be the case and will never be the case, because you have to have a powder booth, whether it's, again, this all determines on, this all relies on what kind of part are we dealing with. So maybe we should pick a couple items here that would, let us play the game as we're going through this. So let's do a set of wheels.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 wheels on one rack. Let's think about that. And then what would be something else? An 8-foot section of fencing.
Yeah.
Like significant, like we're talking steel.
Yeah, 10, 12.
Big, heavy gauge, railing for, let's say, a condominium, or whatever, something significant, where you're going to have a lot of them, not just one off, but you're going to have that over and over and over again for custom fencing and railing. They're all typically long. You're going a long distance, so the longer the sections you can get, I've seen them up 20 foot, and we sell booths, and you and I have been to accounts together that they do 20 to 24 sections of foot sections that are like 6 feet high. They're monstrous.
Really rare in my territory because of the hills, but you do have the need for that. And if your customer base requires that length, then you have to have that oven, that spray booth, and the space to accommodate that length. So
a 20-foot oven wouldn't cut it for a 20-foot part. No. You're gonna have to have a lot of movement, to a lot of room to move. So you would at least, I would imagine, at least need 25 feet.
Certainly for the spray booth you would.
Correct.
The oven, not as much, but be thinking about growth, because if you stop at 20 feet, your customers are going to come in and say, "Can you do 24?"
And you might, when you're building it, if you build it and they will come, I guarantee you, if your work is good, they will. Yeah. But you and I have seen that over and over again. It's interesting where you and I can go into an account and go, man, if they don't listen, they're gone. They're going to be gone. The guy that's wiping his parts down with Simple Green, and touting that he has really good pretreatment, that it's not going to be around long unless he makes major changes. But anyway, I got off subject. Yeah. So we've got our small 4 wheels.
Yeah. And
we have our large, which is
rail.
Over and over and over again, they do like a 20 foot, or let's say 20 foot by 6 foot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
very common.
Just a railing. So we're going to need to know moving forward what we're dealing with. So we're going to lay those two out here. All right. Let's talk about a couple things before we even get into the booths and the ovens and all that. Let's talk about what somebody needs to have going from liquid, which you weren't utilizing necessarily a lot of water, because the liquid, you're potting it. Although the parts require cleaning, a lot of people really don't pre-treat a lot of stuff that the liquid paint's going on.
Liquid paint is much more forgiving for a non-perfect substrate.
You also have the solvent for the bite.
Yeah.
That's helping it grab to whatever it's being sprayed on. So things like chrome, which is ridiculous with powder. and I'm talking about chrome as a substrate, not as a color. Okay, so neither liquid or powder are going to do great on something like that because it's non-porous. Any kind of agitation to that surface, you're going to pretty much get whatever you put on it off. But outside of that, that liquid will hold on to anything you spray it on.
Yeah, including plastics.
Yep.
We're away from the wheel, but there may be, you got a center
Yeah,
that goes on that wheel, and some of those are still plastic. They're not all billet or
Correct.
aluminum. So you get into that, and now I've got different substrates. Can I put that plastic in my 400-degree oven? Probably not.
no. Or Bondo.
Bondo wants to pop off at high temperature. There are other things, all metal, lab metal.
JB Weld.
JB Weld holds up great.
Yep.
There are caulks now that hold up wonderfully. You put it on the substrate, put your caulk bead down, powder coat over the top of it, it melts in and it's flawless and it looks fantastic.
You and I ran into that Henkel caulk a long time ago. You remember what the name of it was? Terrasol.
Terrasol something 06 or 60 something other.
Yeah, it worked fantastic. We'll
put something up later on that, what that product number is.
Yeah.
We'll get it to you.
All right, so as we go through the utilities that they need to understand and they need to be thinking about when they're making a transition, city water versus city sewer, or city water and city sewer.
Yes.
Both of those need to find out. How are you going to cure your parts? Electricity, natural gas, propane.
Right.
All have very different costs, impacts. But like if you're looking at electric convection, which I've dealt with, now your electric bill is going to be through the roof.
Yeah.
But if you go with electric, like IR,
Which stands for
infrared, if you go that route, it's not as high of an impact.
No, because you can go down
It's
to zero.
short-term boosts.
When there's no parts there, it goes
Yep.
either to idle or completely off.
That's right. Then you make the step to natural gas. Natural gas is probably the most common.
Well, especially in an industrial
Correct.
setting, in an industrial park.
Yep. And exactly. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you want to start up a powder coating shop, you might not have access to it.
You're going to call Hank.
You're going to call the propane man.
Propane accessory.
And he might bring his little boy Bobby along with him for training day. I don't know. Power. Let's talk about power a little bit.
Typically 480 or 233 phase. Most all your big fans that are going to be associated with your spray boost and your ovens to circulate the hot air, it's all going to be 3-phase. Can they do it in single phase? They can, but it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for price and it's going to hurt for utility costs. So keep in mind, you're investing in this, and your equipment is part of your overall applied cost to the product. So what does it cost me to operate this long term? What's my cost of ownership of this equipment? So I have to think about that when I'm choosing my voltages, my fuels, and so forth.
Yep. Compressed air.
Got to be clean for powder.
Compressed air compressed air could be expensive.
Compressed air is typically the most expensive utility in your shop. However, the good news is powder uses way much less air consumption, CFM.
Correct.
And I'm sure most of you viewers know there's a difference between PSI and CFM. PSI is for your pressure per square inch, right? And then CFM's for cubic foot per minute. That's the volume of air. So a typical manual powder unit, 6 CFM wide open, and that's no air at all compared to a agitator that's sitting on a pressure pot is right at 6 CFM. Just the agitator on the pressure pot or a drum is 6 CFM. Now my spray gun, if I'm into a conventional HVLP, LVMP, or electrostatic, I'm in the 15 to 20 CFM potentially. So there's a big savings in
Yes.
there for your utilities to go to powder. But we need to make sure that we have very clean, very dry air for powder, that we have micron filtration, low micron filtration to get the moisture out. We go through a coalescing filter that takes the oil and oil vapor out. And then I like to go an extra step and put a desiccant tower in there too at the point of use, so that we know that we're using very clean, very dry air, and that we do not have that getting applied to the substrate, nor do we have it attaching to the stepper motors that are in
Correct.
these GEMA units, right?
Yep.
I've seen literally a drop of water early on, back in the easy unit days,
Oh yeah.
that it messed that stepper motor up and wouldn't work. We tore it apart, me and the customer, and went, oh, look at that. Got that moisture out of there, put it back together, and it took off to working. And it just doesn't take much to upset very fine operational equipment. So,
Well, not to mention the fact that if you have moisture getting through your powder gun, well, first of all, if you have a batch operation and you've got anything bad in your compressed air is what's fluidizing your hopper or your box feeder, and you're throwing moisture right there. So you've got a problem with powder clumping and major issues. Then you have issues if it gets all the way through the gun. You've introduced moisture into your gun, not a good thing. And if that moisture gets, or oil or whatever, gets on the surface of your part,
delamination
mixed in with the powder, you have a defect, delamination potential, and a rework potential. So, not good.
rework. We've said this before. I'm going to keep drilling it every chance I get to you guys. Rework is not 2, it's 3. I did it again, and I missed one that I ought to be doing for the first time. So rework is 3 times, not 2.
All right. Do you have good environmental air quality in the coating air? So basically, people do have environmental rooms. People have, things that they'll build for powder coating. Do you have the ability to do that? Will you need it for your operation? But whatever you do, you need to be aware of one major issue when it comes to, I believe it's just as bad for liquid, if not worse, since you've got parts drying out on the plant floor.
Vagrant Airflow.
Vagrant Airflow, the cousin Eddie of the finishing process.
He's terrible.
And that's...
Never invite that dude.
No. Is it? Your name's Eddie.
It is. Never invite cousin Eddie.
Is there a reason for that?
No, that's just in the movies. But
That was filmed much later than you were born, so I can't.
oh yeah.
All right. So Vagrant Airflow, what is that? Vagrant Airflow is when Bubba and Claude are in a building that has 2 garage doors on opposing sides of the building, and the powder coating booth is right in the middle of those 2 garage doors, and Claude goes and opens up his garage door because he's hot. He wants some cold air to come over, some cooler air to whip through the plant. And Bubba on the other side of the plant says, man, that's a great idea. So he goes and opens his garage door, and now you have both of them creating
It's a tunnel
vagrant airflow.
And that can be a tunnel effect, which will pull powder out of your booth and or introduce trash, contamination coming off of your potentially gravel parking lot.
Yep.
So, or
UPS truck rolls by, or the FedEx truck rolls by,
the lawn service.
and the lawn service, and all that gets kicked up, and it starts blowing into your plant. Guess where all of it went? It went all over your powder coated parts, all over your liquid parts, whatever it is.
Your spray booth, no matter what it is
a
a big
vacuum.
vacuum. That's right, big vacuum.
Suck it all in, all the trash and well.
Little Linus walks by and this is a blanket and it comes right in.
Right by that powder booth, somebody decided not to buy the doors for the powder booth because they just didn't need it.
Why do I need that?
Save $3,000 and
That comes back to what are your needs for your coating, right? So Do you require a Class A finish, a Class B, Class C, Class D, right? If it's Class D, who cares? You know, let it rip. But if it's Class A, you better take all these steps to protect that substrate from getting contamination on it.
Yep. Now, I'm glad you said that word because the next thing that I want to talk about is pretreatment.
What is pretreatment?
That is actually the first kind of pretreatment that a lot of people ask about that. You ask them what's your what do you use for pretreatment, and they go, "What's pretreatment?"
Yep, they do. Yeah.
So
they know they're cleaning
man,
the part,
it's
but they
frustrating.
don't know it is pretreatment.
It's frustrating from our standpoint because we've seen perfect systems and we've seen lackadaisical, like both sides, like the what's pretreatment and then the the hexavalent chromium processes on the whole other spectrum, right?
Sure.
So basically, there are different ways that you can pre-treat, and you need to think about as you're taking the steps into transitioning from liquid to powder. And people do hand wiping, where they just take a cloth and they just go over it. You need to be as lint-free as possible if you're even considering doing that. And I don't recommend dry wiping. If you're wiping it down, I hope you're using some kind of a cleansing promoter that doesn't leave a residue behind.
Well, the folks that are using wiping pre-treat that could be currently spraying plastic parts that come out of the injection motor,
Yep.
pretty darn clean, and they may just have a little film on them or handprints or something, then they can take a pre-saturated alcohol wipe, right? And wipe it down with that, come behind with a tack cloth, and they're ready to go. If you're doing that and you go, well, I don't want to get into powder coating and powder coat all these other substrates, you can't just necessarily treat it like you have been treating it. You have to go down that road and look at what it's going to take off all the soils, contaminations, and where you're going to put that liquid if you go to liquid, which is a point that we brought up earlier. Am I putting it in a municipality? Am I putting it down city sewer? Or am I putting it down a septic tank? What do I have to do with this chemical before it goes out by my shop? What have I got to do with it before it goes out
You
of
have
my
to
shop?
neutralize it, or
They will chase it back to you.
yes, they will.
They have things they put down in the sewer, and they go, well, it's not coming from here, and they just keep backtracking, and they'll come to you back door.
They will.
They'll find you.
Then there's blasting. Sometimes people just do blasting for powder. Again, blasting is something that you rarely hear about when liquid is involved. Blasting is basically getting impurities off the surface of the metal or uniforming the surface of the metal so that you can get that bite with powder.
Some of your architectural coatings that are really thick, and some of your protective coatings. Most all your protective coatings, pipe that goes in the ground for potable water or sewage going away, bridge construction, things of that nature. They use polyureas and epoxies at very high film builds, up to 70 mils wet.
Yep.
I've seen them hang that stuff. Have one of my customers now that hangs 70 mils wet, and it doesn't run. It's phenomenal.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but because that's so thick, it has to have a deep anchor profile.
I've seen that the red rust kind of color that they spray on like the big ball valves and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of that whole potable water's moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what the formulation of that was or what that was.
Well, if it was powder, I've seen it in epoxies.
That's it, because you do have to have the chemical resistance from that as well.
Yes.
And it gets buried, so they're
Heavy,
trying to give
heavy
it that
thickness. Yeah.
that much more protection.
So think about what your parts are, what environment they're going to go in, how clean do I have to have it to meet my salt spray. We're headed that direction. So in pretreatment, I have to learn if it's a salt spray. If it's going on automotive, I guarantee it has to have a salt spray test.
Oh yeah.
Or a salt fog test. They put it in a chamber.
With a crosshatch.
Yeah.
Crosshatch for to see what how fast it will delaminate if it's ever
Creep.
Yeah, how fast it creeps.
Rust creep, and it pushes it off as the rust gets underneath the coating. And
or will it start to help kind of repair itself and try to block, create a dam that you're not being able to move past. It's pretty amazing technology.
It is, and that is where you have to determine with your end user, the end users, the environment, and your chemical person that you're going to partner with. You have to determine whether or not that you have to put another layer. Think of coatings as layers, and your pretreatment can be a coating of protection, right? We're applying very rarely zinc phosphate, but other phosphates, iron phosphates, right? The hexavalents that you're talking about that nobody wants to see anymore.
That's a whole
but all that
world.
That's all technology driven for what you need to do. And we're not those guys. We partner with them. We've talked about it, but ultimately we're not that guy. You get that information from your chemical supplier partner, and with where the part is going, where the substrate's going, what's the environment. So we got to know that. So all of the pretreatment that you've been doing for liquid may not be applicable when you go to powder.
Correct.
We're just trying to make you aware of that. And we're going down the rabbit hole.
Or it might get more stringent.
It's more likely. It's more likely going to.
Because you're not only cleaning the surface, you've got to get the oils, the smut, the different, whatever it picked up along the way. Mm-hmm. You've not only got to get that out, but you have to get off oils. Everything that's there, that's just resting on that surface has got to go. Because anything left is going to be damning for your longevity of your part and the powder. So that's why in the powder industry, on large scale, there's a lot of inline washers, conveyorized. So that 20 foot by 6 foot railing is either going to be hung like 5 or 6 of those across on a really large custom rack that's going to roll them in and out of booths and pressure washing stations and ovens for cure. That's going to be hung one rail at a time, or maybe 2 side by side, going through an inline wash system with hundreds of jets, aimed straight on it. The water is heated to help aid in getting rid of the oils and the smut that's on the surface. There's a lot of movement and a lot of surface agitation. And there's impingement. There's reasonings for that is to get it clean.
Yep. And then you got dip, you got tanks.
And you got other things you got to worry about that you didn't have to worry about with the liquid side. You got to worry about where that water is resting. Where does the water go once you've pressure washed whatever the part is?
Is it trapped?
Is there some trapped in a small dent at the bottom? Is it trapped in a channel of extrusion that happens to be turned upside down when you're coating it? All that has to be out. And if you most of the time, those parts when they come out of the washer have to go into a dry off oven. Because if you just let that part sit and ambient dry, A, it's going to take a long time, too long. B, it's collecting all that garbage brought by Mr. Vagrant Airflow. It's going to be capturing all that.
Yeah.
So now you're dirty again. And what's the point of pretreatment at that point? When you pre-treat something, it needs to go from the pre-treat booth into dry off immediately, from dry off into the booth immediately to powder coat.
Yes.
And if you're going into the booth to powder coat, it does not mean you have to hot flock it with a very hot part. The powder booth is meant to be a vagrant airflow free zone. That's why powder booths are designed to have doors on the front of them with filters in the doors. The part goes in the booth, you shut the doors, let the part cool down for 20, 30 minutes, take a break, or pre-treat a part while you're waiting for that. Whatever the cycle is in that particular plant. But you gotta do it right. If you hot flock, you might have too high a film build. You might be relying on hot flocking if your part's not grounded properly. And if you go to airpower-usa.com and go to videos, we do a number of videos on ground that are fantastic.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good ground, you're fighting a losing battle anyway, and I'm not going to go down that path. But hot flocking, a lot of these things are utilized as shortcuts. There are no shortcuts that are really beneficial.
Not in powder.
No.
You can't cheat powder.
Powder, you have to do it the right way.
You can't cheat it.
So, back to the pressure washing. We got pressure washing with a wand or, for the wheels, the small parts, or the big parts, you have inline washers, so you have to make some decisions there. And do you want a regular pressure wand, or do you want a steam wand, which adds amazing volume of heat, pressure, and steam jets that actually do a very good job cleaning?
Yeah, it's
surface.
And utilizes less water.
Yes.
So there's a number of choices. You just got to weigh them all. When you're looking at this switch from transition from liquid to powder, you have to start a list, and you have to come out at the bottom of the list and go, wow, I really like the direction that this powder's going, or I can't afford that, or it's not in my cards. Enough of my parts aren't there to move to powder, to charge, for the extra utilities, what have you. So this list is very important.
Yep. And again, thinking about the future, if you're a fence and railing manufacturer and you're coating your own fence and railing, you might, if you're going to do an automated system, not automated fully, but like a conveyorized system to push the parts through the pressure washing, the drive ovens, so and so on.
You can push, pull, or you can index. Just turn the conveyor on and let it move up.
You might simply have a one-stage quick wash that just is kind of like the chemistry and then a rinse. But typically, you really should investigate starting at a 3-stage system at a bare minimum. 3 stages in your pre-treatment, which would be the first
wash.
is
alkaline wash.
Alkaline wash to get it cleaned up, and then you have a rinse, or that could be
no, it's going to be a rinse.
Yeah, it's going to be a rinse to get all of that cleaner so you don't drag it out.
And you have to stop that action.
Yeah, and then it would go to your 3rd stage, which would be your
coater and leave it in place.
Phosphate. What is the
phosphate or
but the adhesion promoter, basically.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for.
Open the surface.
So your phosphate, iron phosphate, zinc phosphate, whatever. And there are other, magic chemistries that are out there, whatever, but those are some tried and true, with the iron phosphate. But if you're doing fencing and railing, and there is a possibility that you could make your line available to somebody who needs architectural grade warranties, which I'm talking like 10, 20-year type warranties.
AMA specs.
When you're, you can iron phosphate, you can get close to like an AMA 26. Well, you can do an AMA 2603, pretty sure. Mm-hmm. But 0405, you're not going to touch with a 3-stage pre-treatment.
And your coating supplier is going to say, nope.
I can't sell you that.
Or I'm not going to warranty it.
Yep.
You're on your own. If you try to do this, you're on your own, and whatever comebackers that you have or failures in the field, I'm not a part of it. I'm not going to help you.
So when you get to your high-end series for architectural grade, You know, you definitely want to get involved with AMA, pretty sure. That's AAMA. And you definitely need to look at a minimum of like a 5-stage to a 7-stage pretreatment where you have Cadillac, let's call it Cadillac, Ferrari, whatever level pretreatment that gives that part the stability before the paint even goes on it, gives it the stability to hold up on its own to, you know, decades of wear and tear. So, you know, you look at very popular buildings in Dubai, you look at buildings that are in our big cities in the U.S.
They're way up there.
That are way up there. They only want to paint that one time.
Yeah.
And, you know, within reason, at some point, somebody's going to have to do something, you know, to refinish or bring it to life again at some point. That might be 30 years, 20, 30, 40 years, but it's going to have to be done.
Yeah.
And, but at least you've given it long term of multiple generations of worry-free life.
Yes.
And you're not going to get that with 3 and below.
No.
3 stages and below.
No.
So build it. Go out and set the appointments with the customers that you currently do your fencing with, and investigate with them. Go down the road to some of their other competitors and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm looking at doing. Would this help you? You might be surprised what you find out.
You have to sell your line.
That's right.
And your capabilities. To be a successful shop, you have to know what you have to offer versus your competition, and you have to be able to help your end user or the end user understand why this level is better than this level, and explain the two differences to them. And there's an old adage that I learned way before I came in this industry. 80% of the people buy based on the knowledge you give them, right? That's through everything I've ever touched, it was that way. 10% of the people buy the highest all the time, just because they think it's the best. And 10% of the people buy the cheapest all the time, just because they think cheap.
Yep.
And the other majority of the people, the 80%, buys based on the knowledge you give them about your process or the product and the warranty and all those things that you educate them on. So you have to be educated to convey that information. And if you need help, then you come to your partner, your chemical supplier, your equipment supplier, your coating supplier, and you take them into the meeting with you and say, hey, this is my team. I'm not here alone. I'm not just a job shop or a small line or a big line for that matter. And I'm not alone in this. I have backup. These are the quality of the people that I'm engaging with and choosing to be a partner with. They're with me. It's not just me. These people are all with me. So sell that. That's a selling feature for moving forward. Resource.
All right. 1-800-334-1001. This is the video version of the podcast. So if you're listening to this, you can also watch this at Air Power Airwaves.com. And our podcast is hosted by Buzzsprout. I'm kind of happy to say that we haven't even been in this for a full year yet, and we're right at about 800 downloads of just the audio version.
That's great.
So that's pretty cool. Thank you for your support and for watching. AirPowerAirwaves.com, the corporate page for us where you can find parts, information, contact people, processes that we work with on assemble, move, and coat. That's all available at airpower-usa.com. And social media, number one is our YouTube channel. We have a strong YouTube channel. It's just go to YouTube and type in Air Power Inc. or Air Power Manufacturing Solutions, and you will find our Air Power. Just look for that logo right up there, and you'll see it, and it'll be ready to go. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram are also available. Look for us. But thank you so much, Eddie.
Brother?
Knocked out a first podcast with you. I'm looking forward to filming our second one here shortly.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not even going to say what it's about, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your time with us on Air Power Airwaves. And before I break from this, you know what I'm going to say, and I know, let me hear you say it.
I think they know it.
Manufacture it a great day.
See you next time.